January 2013. A hunter is walking across the frozen surface of Hudson Bay in the far north of Quebec when he hears a sound that has no business being out here. A breath, not wind, not ice cracking. A wet, heaving gasp, the sound of a lung the size of a suitcase emptying and filling, rising up out of the frozen sea beneath his feet. He follows it, and what he finds, 30 kilometers from shore, is a single hole in the ice. One patch of open black water in an endless white plain, a patch barely bigger than the bed of a pickup truck. And crowded into it, taking turns, pressing against each other for space, are 12 killer whales. 12 of them. Rising, breathing, sinking. Rising, breathing, sinking. All of them fighting for the same shrinking mouthful of air. These are orcas, the single most powerful predator in the ocean. Animals that hunt great white sharks for their livers. Animals that drown blue whales, the largest creatures that have ever existed on planet Earth. Nothing in the sea hunts them. Nothing. They sit at the very top of every food web they touch, in every ocean on the planet. And right now, 12 of them are about to die. Slowly, one missed breath at a time, trapped under a ceiling they cannot break. Because above them, in every direction, for as far as anything can swim, the ocean has turned to stone. The nearest open water is more than 600 kilometers away, farther than any of these animals could ever hold their breath. The hole they are breathing through is freezing shut a little more with every hour, and the ice below the surface is closing in like a fist. The most dangerous animal in the ocean, and it has been beaten. Not by a bigger predator, not by a rival, not by anything it could bite, or ram, or outswim, or outthink. It has been beaten by frozen water. This is the one thing on Earth that the ocean's apex predator cannot conquer. The one thing that turns the hunter into something helpless and gasping and afraid. And to understand why an animal this powerful is so completely undone by something as simple as ice, we have to look at the strangest fear in the entire natural world. Here is the thing you have to understand about killer whales before any of this makes sense. Nothing scares them. When a pod of orcas moves into an area, the entire ocean reorganizes itself around their presence. Seals haul out onto land and refuse to enter the water. Dolphins scatter. Great white sharks, animals we think of as the ultimate ocean predator, will abandon a rich feeding ground entirely and not return for a year just because orcas passed through. There are records of white sharks fleeing so fast, so far the moment orcas arrive, that researchers tracking them thought their equipment had broken. Even the giants aren't safe. Off the coast of Australia, orcas have been filmed hunting and killing blue whales, dragging down the largest animal that has ever lived. Narwhals go silent and press themselves against the shoreline. Belugas freeze. The word for what an orca is in the ocean isn't predator. It's closer to nightmare. So think about what it takes to frighten a creature like that. Think about how completely the rules have to break for the animal that terrifies everything else to suddenly become the one that's terrified. That's what ice does. Not a bigger animal, not a stronger one. A change in the state of the water itself, from liquid to solid, is the only thing in the natural world that reduces a killer whale to a gasping, trapped, dying thing. And once you understand how, you start to see something incredible. You start to see that this single weakness has quietly shaped the entire map of life at the top and bottom of our planet. It has decided who lives and who dies across millions of square kilometers of ocean. It has driven the evolution of some of the strangest animals on Earth, and it is disappearing, right now, with consequences almost nobody is talking about. So, there are 3 questions we have to answer. First, how is it even possible? How can an animal this powerful, this intelligent, be completely helpless against a few feet of frozen water? Second, if ice is a death trap for orcas, then why on earth do the deadliest killer whales on the planet deliberately swim into it to hunt? And third, the strangest question of all, why has nearly every animal the orca hunts evolved to run toward the ice? Straight toward the one thing that kills their hunter? Let's start at the bottom, with the trap itself. To understand why ice kills orcas, you have to understand one simple, brutal fact about them. They have to breathe. We forget this because they live underwater, but a killer whale is a mammal, exactly like you. It has lungs. It cannot pull oxygen out of the water like a fish. Every few minutes, no matter what it is doing, hunting, sleeping, fleeing, it has to bring its body to the surface, break through into the air, and take a breath. On average, an orca surfaces every 3 to 4 minutes. Now, hold that thought, 3 to 4 minutes, and picture what a sheet of sea ice actually is. It isn't a thin skin. In the high Arctic, in deep winter, it is a solid lid over the ocean that can stretch unbroken for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. A roof over the entire sea. And here's the trap. A seal can breathe under that roof because a seal can gnaw and scratch breathing holes and keep them open all winter. A bowhead whale can breathe under that roof because, and we'll come back to this, it can smash straight up through the ice with its own head. But an orca can do neither of those things. It cannot chew a hole, and it cannot break the ice from below. Why not? Look at its back. Rising off the spine of a male killer whale is a dorsal fin that can stand nearly 2 meters tall as a grown man. It's the tallest fin of any animal in the ocean, a black blade that cuts the surface like a sail. And in open water, it's an advantage. It gives the orca stability, lets it turn and accelerate with impossible precision. But under ice, that magnificent fin becomes a death sentence. Think about it. To breathe under a sheet of ice, the orca would have to rise straight up and drive that huge, rigid fin into a solid ceiling. It can't punch through. The fin just jams against the underside of the ice, blocking the animal from ever reaching the surface, from ever reaching air. A smooth-backed animal might slip along the underside of the ice and find a crack. The orca, with its great sail of a fin, gets stopped short every time, held a few agonizing centimeters below a surface it cannot break, with its lungs screaming. And it gets worse. Because that same fin is also one of the ways an orca loses heat. Unlike the rest of its body, the dorsal fin isn't wrapped in a thick blanket of insulating blubber. It's thin and full of blood vessels, which means in truly freezing water, it bleeds precious body heat straight into the sea. The very feature that makes an orca a perfect predator in open ocean makes it fragile, cold, and trapped under ice. Here's the deepest part of the problem, though. Orcas never evolved to deal with this. For most of their history, they simply didn't go into the frozen zones. Ice was a wall they stayed away from, the edge of their world. They have no instinct for reading it, no ability to sense when a sheet is about to close over them. So when the ice comes, fast, in a sudden cold snap on a shifting wind, they don't see it coming. One day there's open water. The next, the roof slams shut, and they are on the wrong side of it. That is exactly what happened at Hudson Bay. The scientists who studied that entrapment believe a sudden drop in temperature caught the pod completely off guard. They were hunting in open water, the way orcas always have, and the sea froze behind them, sealing the exits, leaving them boxed into that one dwindling hole 30 kilometers from shore. And what those trapped whales did next tells you everything about how desperate the situation was. An orca's neck is nearly rigid. It can't tilt its head up to scan the surface the way you or I would. So, to search for another opening in the ice, the whales did something eerie. One by one, they thrust their entire bodies straight up out of the water, rising vertically, pushing their heads high into the freezing air, to look. It's a behavior called spy hopping, and normally, orcas use it to peer at prey. Here they were using it to search the horizon for any crack, any lead, any second hole that might mean escape. There wasn't one. The villagers who came out to see them described the whales thrashing and gasping, hurling themselves upward for air, crowding a hole that was slowly icing over in the cold. At one point, a curious polar bear wandered up to the opening, drawn maybe by the easiest meal of its life. The trapped, most powerful predator in the ocean, reduced to potential prey for a bear standing on the roof of its own world. And here is the truly frightening part. This was not a freak, one-in-a-million event. When researchers went back through the records, they found this has happened again and again and again. Documented ice entrapments of killer whales stretch back to the year 1840. Pod after pod, from single stragglers to groups of more than 20 animals at once, caught the same way in the same trap across nearly 2 centuries. And most of the time, there is no lucky escape. Most of the time, these events end exactly one way. The hole freezes over, the breaths come slower, and the ocean's apex predator suffocates beneath a ceiling it was never built to break. There is even a record of a group of orcas that got themselves trapped for an entire winter, surviving around a single small pocket of open water kept clear by the currents, unable to leave because the only way out was to hold their breath under an unbroken sheet of pack ice for longer than any of them could survive. Months circling one hole, prisoners of the frozen sea. So that's the first answer. That's how. A breath they can't skip, a fin they can't fold, a ceiling they can't break, and no instinct to see it coming. Which raises an obvious question. If ice is this deadly to them, if it's a trap that has been killing their kind for centuries, then why do orcas go anywhere near it? Because they do. In fact, some of the most spectacular hunting on the entire planet happens when killer whales deliberately swim into the ice. At the bottom of the world, in the freezing waters around Antarctica, there is a type of killer whale that has built its entire way of life around the ice. And what it does there is one of the most sophisticated hunts ever witnessed in nature. Picture a Weddell seal, fat, sleepy, safe, hauled out on a flat sheet of floating ice, a floe drifting in the open sea. Out of the water, that seal is untouchable. No orca can reach it up there. The seal knows this. It's the whole reason it climbed out. Then it notices the whales. A group of orcas, sometimes 6, 7, 8 of them, has spotted the seal, and rather than give up, they begin to do something that looks less like animal instinct and more like a military operation. They line up side by side, in formation. They dive together, and they swim in perfect unison, straight at the ice floe, building a wave. Not a random splash. A single coordinated wall of water pushed by the synchronized bodies of half a dozen apex predators rolling toward the floe. The wave hits the ice and washes across the top of it, and either sweeps the seal off into the water or tilts and cracks the entire floe, tumbling the seal into the sea where the orcas are already waiting, mouths open in the dark. If the first wave doesn't work, they circle back and do it again. And again. Researchers who studied this behavior watched groups produce these waves over and over, patient, relentless, adjusting each time. On the seals they targeted this way, the orcas succeeded around 3 out of every 4 attempts. 3 out of 4. A single hunt could take half an hour of coordinated, deliberate, wave after wave after wave. This is not an animal that fears the ice. This is an animal that has turned the ice into a hunting tool, that reads the flows, times the waves, and uses the frozen sea as a stage for one of the most intelligent group hunts on Earth. So how do we square that with everything we just learned? How can the same animal be a helpless, gasping victim of the ice in Hudson Bay and its absolute master in the Antarctic? Here's the answer. And it's the key to this entire story. Orcas are not afraid of ice. They're afraid of the ceiling. There's a world of difference between the two, and it is the difference between life and death. What the Antarctic hunters use is the edge, floating floes, drifting chunks, broken pack, with open water all around them and above them. In that world, the orca is never more than a body length from air. It can hunt right up against the ice, wave wash a seal off a floe, and still surface freely whenever it needs to breathe. The ice is scenery. The ceiling is open. What killed the whales in Hudson Bay was something completely different. That was fast ice and closing pack ice, a solid, continuous, unbroken lid sealing off the surface for hundreds of kilometers with no opening in sight, no edge, no air, just roof. So the fear isn't cold. It isn't ice as an object. It's that one specific, lethal situation, being caught under a continuous frozen roof with no way up. An orca will happily swim through a maze of floating ice to hunt a seal. But the moment that ice closes over into a single unbroken sheet, the moment the ceiling seals shut, The most powerful predator in the ocean is living on a countdown, measured in breaths. The ice edge is a hunting ground, the sealed ice is a tomb, and the line between them can be crossed in a single cold night on a shifting wind, which is exactly what makes it so dangerous and exactly what those Hudson Bay whales discovered too late. Now. Here is where the story turns from incredible to almost unbelievable. Because there are animals in the ocean that have understood this weakness, this one fatal flaw in the world's top predator, for millions of years, and they have built their entire existence around exploiting it. Think about what it means to be hunted by an orca. You are being pursued by something faster than you, smarter than you, that hunts in coordinated packs, that never gives up, and that will find you no matter how you run. If you are a beluga, or a narwhal, or a bowhead whale, the killer whale is not just a predator. In many cases, it is your only real predator on Earth. Nothing else hunts you, just them. So, evolution faced a problem. How do you survive something you cannot outfight and cannot outswim? And the answer these animals found is beautiful, and it is the whole point of this video. They run to the one place their hunter cannot follow. They run into the ice. Start with the beluga and the narwhal. Look closely at their backs, and you'll notice something strange, something that sets them apart from almost every other whale in the ocean. They have no dorsal fin. Where an orca has that great 2-meter sail, the beluga and the narwhal have a smooth, low ridge and nothing more. For a long time, that seemed like a small detail. It isn't. It's the difference between life and death. Because a smooth-backed whale can do the one thing the orca cannot. It can slide along the underside of the ice, slip into narrow cracks and breathing holes, and tuck itself up into places where a finned animal would jam and drown. The beluga can take its calf into a maze of ice that an orca literally cannot enter without risking its own life. That missing fin isn't a flaw. It's an escape hatch, written into their anatomy, shaped over millions of years by the constant pressure of the hunter that couldn't follow. Now go bigger. Go to the bowhead whale, and prepare to be amazed. The bowhead lives its entire life in the frozen Arctic. Its only natural predator is the killer whale, and to escape that predator, it has become something extraordinary. The bowhead can break through thick sea ice with its own massive, reinforced skull. Read that again. This animal deliberately lives under the ice, in the exact death trap that kills orcas, and when it needs to breathe, it simply rises up and smashes a hole through the frozen roof with its head. The ice that suffocates the world's apex predator, the bowhead uses as a shield, a roof, and a fortress. And scientists now believe this single relationship, bowhead versus orca, hidden beneath the ice, may have shaped almost everything strange about this animal. Its enormous head, its incredibly thick blubber, even its lifespan, which is beyond anything else in the mammal world. Bowheads can live more than 200 years. Some individuals alive today were born before the American Civil War, and that whole bizarre, ancient, ice-armored body may exist because generation after generation, the ones who could hide under the ice from the killer whales were the ones who survived to breed. The ice didn't just protect the bowhead. The ice built the bowhead, but the most fascinating part isn't the anatomy. It's the behavior. Because scientists have now tracked these animals, predator and prey at the same time, and what they found is a hidden landscape of terror that covers the entire Arctic. They call it a seascape of fear. Here's what it means. When killer whales are present, the prey animals don't just flinch and recover. They completely rewrite their lives around the threat. Bowheads tracked in the Canadian Arctic were found to abandon the best feeding grounds, the rich, open, food-filled water, and retreat into heavy broken sea ice and shallow shorelines where there was almost nothing to eat. They chose to go hungry, for weeks, because starving in the safety of the ice was better than feeding in the open where the orcas could reach them. Think about what that reveals. The killer whale doesn't even have to attack. Its mere presence, the possibility of it, is enough to push 1,000-kilogram whales out of their own feeding grounds and press them into the ice, trading food for survival. The fear alone reshapes the map. There are invisible walls across the Arctic Ocean, walls of terror, and they are drawn precisely along the line of the ice. On one side, open water, food, and death. On the other, ice, hunger, and safety. For millions of years, that was the deal. That was the balance at the top of the world. The orca ruled the open water, the ice ruled the orca, and everything the orca hunted survived by staying on the right side of that frozen line. It was one of the oldest, most stable arrangements in nature. And in the span of a single human lifetime, we are erasing it. Here is the part of the story that turns it from a nature documentary into something closer to a warning. The Arctic is warming nearly 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. And as it warms, the ice, the wall, the ceiling, the ancient dividing line, is melting away. And the orcas have noticed. For all of history, the frozen north was a locked door. Orcas could visit the edges in summer, but they could never truly move in because the ice would always come and threaten to trap them. That door is now standing open. Every year, the ice forms later, melts earlier, and covers less of the sea. And every year, killer whales push farther and farther into waters they could never safely enter before. Scientists tracking them describe it in stark terms. The orcas aren't just visiting the Arctic anymore. They are colonizing it, moving in, setting up in seas that were, until recently, one of the only refugees on the planet they couldn't reach. And for the animals that spent millions of years hiding behind that wall of ice, the bowhead, the beluga, the narwhal, this is a catastrophe unfolding in slow motion. Their entire survival strategy, the whole reason they evolved the way they did, was built on one assumption: the killer whales cannot follow us here. That assumption is now false. The numbers are already frightening. In one part of the Canadian Arctic, researchers estimated that a seasonal population of only about 160 killer whales could kill more than 1,000 narwhals in a single year. And as the ice retreats and more orcas move in and the prey lose the frozen refuge that kept them alive, that pressure is only climbing. The seascape of fear is expanding. The safe side of the wall is shrinking. And then, because nature is never simple, there's the twist at the other end of the earth. Remember the Antarctic orcas, the ones that mastered the ice, the wave washers, the geniuses of the frozen hunt? They're losing too. Because their entire way of life depends on seals hauled out on floating ice. And as the Antarctic ice vanishes, the seals are increasingly staying on solid land instead, out of reach where no wave can wash them off. One specialized group of these ice-hunting orcas has been declining by around 5% every single year. Scientists watching them fear we aren't just losing whales. We're watching the extinction of a culture, a way of hunting passed down through generations, dying out as the ice that made it possible disappears. So the melting ice breaks the world in both directions at once. In the north, it tears down the wall that protected the hunted, and the killers pour in. In the south, it dissolves the very stage the ice hunters depended on, and they starve. The prey lose their shelter. The specialists lose their craft. Everybody loses, and the thing they all had in common, the thing that ruled them all, was the ice. Which brings us back to that hole in the ice in Hudson Bay. Those 12 killer whales gasping in a shrinking pool of open water 30 kilometers from shore, 600 kilometers from the open sea. Do you want to know what happened to them? They lived. Overnight, the wind shifted. The pack ice, the same restless moving ice that had trapped them, cracked and drifted, and by pure chance it opened a passage, a thin corridor of open water, a lead running all the way to the distant sea. The next morning, 2 men went out across the ice to check on the whales, and the hole was empty. In the night, the pod had found the opening and vanished into the deep. The local elders credited the new moon, the turning tide, the shifting currents. Whatever it was, the whales got a second chance almost nothing in nature ever gets. The ice let them go, but understand what saved them. It wasn't strength, it wasn't intelligence. The most powerful predators in the ocean didn't fight their way out. They were released by a lucky shift of wind by ice that happened to open instead of close. That's how narrow the margin is at the top of the world. That's how completely even the ocean's champion lives and dies at the mercy of the frozen sea. That was one pod, one night, one lucky crack in the ice. But the larger ice, the great frozen ceiling that has ruled the top and bottom of our planet for millions of years, the wall that decided who hunts and who hides, the line that built the bowhead and shielded the narwhal and humbled the killer whale, that ice is shifting now too, not on a single winter night. Not in a way that opens a passage and lets everyone go free. It's shifting in one direction. It's melting. And when it finishes, there will be no lucky corridor to the open sea. There will just be open sea, everywhere. And the one rule the whole ocean agreed on, the rule that said the ice is where the killers cannot go, will be gone. The apex predator was never really afraid of the cold. It was afraid of the ceiling, and for the first time in the history of the frozen world, the ceiling is coming down. If you want to keep going down, to the place these whales spend most of their lives, the crushing black world that terrifies almost everything that enters it. Watch this next. Why the deep ocean gets more terrifying the further down you go.